What if I told you that Prismacolor pencils can look like watercolor? I accidentally discovered a method using the Ohuhu colorless blender that made my colored pencil art look shockingly like watercolor, and I had to test if it was a fluke or a legit hack. So in my sketchbook, I'm going to do a test. On the left side, I'm going to use my Prismacolor with the Ohuhu colorless blender, and on the right side, I'm going to use real watercolor pencils and put them up side by side. So come along as we see if this hack really works. So the very first thing that I had to do was to figure out what I was going to draw. For some reason, when I think of watercolor, I think of water animals. So I went on Pinterest and I gathered up a bunch of water animals, and I decided to draw a narwhal on the left side, and I found the most adorable frog for the right side. After I drew the narwhal very lightly with my purple Prismacolor pencil, I'm realizing that this horn is touching the paper in a way that's very unsatisfying, so I'm deciding whether or not I need to erase it or just deal with it. I really don't want to, but I think that it's going to have better results if I do, so erase it is. Let's redraw. And I want to get the horn directly in the corner. I think that would look really cool. I still didn't get it directly in the corner, but it's close enough. And let's go around and solidify some of these lines, add in some flippers. And then now that we're done with the outline of the creature, this is where we need to plan for the blending process. So I am going to use a bunch of different colors. When I tried this in the past, I only used blue and it looked awesome with just the blue. I never tried to blend it with other colored pencil colors. So that's what we're trying today. That's what the test is for. So I'm going around and I am adding a light layer, and I'm trying not to use the tip of my pencil to avoid getting those harsh pencil lines. I'm trying to keep it pretty soft using the edge of my pencil, and as I switch colors, I'm trying to be strategic and keep the colors fairly close to each other in the color wheel. So purple would blend into pink fairly well, and then on the color wheel, the other side of purple is blue, so it's got to blend in well. I'm trying to give this test the best shot that it can, so I'm not being too crazy with my colors. Let's fill in the rest of this narwhal and make it look as majestic and beautiful as it can. Now, as I'm drawing this, I realized that, is it really giving it the best shot that it can if I'm keeping all the colors very easy? I'm not sure, so I popped in some yellow, and we're gonna test out blending colors that might not be very blendable. So yellow it is, and it also looks really cool with yellow. Now before I do the blending, I want to get the other one drawn also. So I'm going to get this stuff out of here if I can. And let's put this to the side. I'll keep it out in case I need to do more detail work later. And I'm ready for the watercolors. Let's sharpen up a blue. Make sure there's no gritty stuff on the tip. Now this frog is so cute. It's blue and black and very shiny, and he's quite a skinny frog, very leggy. But I really, really love how the colors on the Pinterest picture that I'm looking at blended together. So I figured this would be a pretty good test for my watercolor. As I started drawing these feet, I'm realizing that they turned out looking different. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. Oh, this isn't part of it. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we're good. Let's move on and draw the rest of these frog legs. Okay, casualty. No big deal. Oh my. Alright, I think I figured it out. I'm gonna put these here so that I can think about my mortality for a second. Now, I think the problem was that the sharpener holder was maybe too full, so I'm hoping that it doesn't break my lead again. Spoiler alert from the future, it fixed the problem. My lead doesn't break anymore. Now, you might be curious as to why I'm using watercolor pencil instead of real watercolor palettes. And the answer is because I'm not a pro at watercolor in general. So I feel comfortable with pencils, and I know that watercolor pencils are a thing. So I decided that watercolor pencil is probably the easiest way for me to ease into the watercolor world. And I do plan on this page using different methods of watercolor effects with these pencils. So let's see how it turns out. I think we'll get some decent comparisons with what I plan to do. So let's finish up this frog. The eyes are the last thing that I have to do. And I'm pretty sure that the narwhal and the frog at this point are on equal playing grounds. All right, I think I am done. Very exciting. So I will do the watercolor first. Let's get this out of here. I have a rag and I have my water. And let's get to it. So I have done quite a bit of research and I watched a lot of tutorials on how to do watercolor and specifically with watercolor pencils. So the way that it works is once it is activated with water, the colors get really vibrant, and the blending technique that you want to use is to always start from the least or the lightest color and then work towards the darkest. Because once you have the darkest color on your paintbrush, it will stay on the paintbrush, and everywhere that you move your brush after that will get dark. So I'm starting from the lightest and I'm moving to the dark, and then once I'm done with the dark, I wash it off and then get clean water on. And then do it all over again once I put the brush down on the page, going from light to dark. Now, as I'm working on this frog and doing this technique, I'm trying to pay attention to how everything is actually moving so that I have these notes in my head for when I compare it with the Ohuhu blending technique. So I notice how smooth everything is looking as I blend. Everything has really soft lines and the edges are really, really smooth and pretty much exactly how you would expect a watercolor picture to look. Now, as we discussed before, I am a bit of an amateur when it comes to these watercolor pencils. So I can still see a bit of the pencil grit underneath the water, and I'm not sure if that's because I'm using too much or too little water. If I had to guess, it might be because I'm using too little water. Now for some of these smaller portions like the feet and the legs, I felt like if I put too much water on, it would start to go outside of the lines of the frog, and I wanted to make sure that everything stayed inside the lines. So I might have subconsciously added too little water. Oh no, can we get rid of that? Let's try to dab. Nope. Moving on. No big deal, no big deal. The vibrancy of this black is incredible. I'm pretty shocked, honestly, that this black could turn so dark after adding water. Now, as we're up this close, you can really see that the outside edges of the frog are very unfinished looking. I do plan on going around with the watercolor pencils and giving it an outline to try to make everything look really crisp and clean and finished. Alright, so I'm kind of thinking that for the black parts of the frog, I want to outline it with the blue. And then for the blue parts of the frog, I'll outline it in a bit of a lighter color, just to make it look a little more funky have it be more colorful and give it some personality. All right, so the outline is done for the frog, and to test out a different method of using these watercolor pencils, I want to give this page a background to use that method. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a color, directly put our wet brush on the tip, and pick up some of that pigment, and then we'll go straight onto the page, and this is going to give it more of a traditional watercolor look with the really soft edges. So let's pick up some more pigment, and now that we have less water from using the brush already, this should be darker in pigment. I'm already having so much fun. Doing the background this way is also going to allow us to add more colors and test out different, shades other than blue and black. The narwhal had blue, pink, purple, and yellow, more of a range. And I did think about that as I was doing the frog and thinking, oh man, I wish I would have done more colors. So this is my chance to do that. I'm adding a lighter lime green color and a magenta. And then once I do that, I am going around the outside just to add some personality to the splotches. As I'm doing this, I notice that when the paper is wet and I add colored pencil on top of it, it activates the colored pencil right then and there. So I'm going to remember that, and I'm going to try to replicate that on the other side. So now that we are finally ready for the Ohuhu colorless blender, let's get to it. So I'm just going to go straight in. I'm going to start with the outline and see how the color changes. And I do notice that the colors get more vibrant in the same way that the watercolor pencil did with water. Almost like it activates the color. Now, going from purple to blue, do they really mesh or blend into each other? I'm not really sure that they do. Let's continue and see how we can blend the rest of this and how it turns out. Now, when I first figured this out, it was during my Easter spread a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure if you saw that or not. And it was with a yellow colored pencil blending it out. It looked really cool, and I wanted to test it out again. So what you saw in the very beginning of this video with the blue heads was my second try for this, and I was still really, really impressed with it. However, it was still only one color. So what you're seeing now is a true test of multiple colors. And what I have noticed so far is that the red pigment that comes through the pink and the purple does act different than the blue and the yellow. The blue and the yellow seem to be very smooth and are acting pretty awesome compared to the red pigment. I'm not really sure why that would be, why the red pigment would act different than the other pigments. So now that we're done with the inside of the narwhal, let's add some outlines to it in the same way that we did the frog. Alright, so now that we are done with the narwhal, let's try to mimic the background of the other side with regular Prismacolor pencils. So because I don't want the lines of the pencil strokes to show through, I'm going with a very light touch at first and blending it out, and it's looking pretty good. I didn't put very much pigment down with the pencil, so I'm going to choose a different pencil and push a little harder, get more of that colored pencil down, and let's see how it spreads. That looked awesome. So far, the blue is my absolute favorite. Now, I want to see if the color will go straight into the wet and if it will activate in the same way that the watercolor pencils did. And it is in like the tiniest way. Let's add some more blender on top and see if we can move it once it's down. Maybe a tiny bit, but not very much. So I'm going around and I'm adding a lot more pigment with the colored pencils first and blending it out, and I'm just trying to mimic the other side at this point, seeing if we can get some kind of a true watercolor look without using watercolor. Let's introduce some green next to the blue and see if we can blend those together seamlessly. I'm not sure why I blended it this way because I think it maybe didn't give accurate results. But I want to see if I can move some of this pigment once it's down. So I'm going to pick up some of this green and move it around the page and see if I can add if I can add blending color. And at this point, I'm almost feeling really silly because if you are given this blender, chances are you have the pack of markers also, like alcohol markers, and you could just do this with alcohol markers. Why am I doing something that's so silly that you could just be doing with cool alcohol markers? I don't know. I think it's because I just really enjoy using colored pencils, and finding out that I can use it in different ways is just really cool and fun and exciting. All right, so I have a dark green here and a light green next to each other. Let's see how these blend together. Oh, okay, so I blended the blue and the green next to each other much more intentionally, and it did blend better because I think the reason is because the alcohol blender dries pretty quickly, so you have to be really intentional with how you use it quickly, and that might give you better results. I don't know, I just really enjoy how this looks. It gives off like a dusty flavor to the art. Alright, so with the other side, I used the paintbrush directly on the watercolor pencil and was able to use it like watercolors. I want to test the same thing on this side and see if I can pick up pigment directly onto the colorless blender. And you can, but it doesn't move around very well. So I would not suggest using it this way. I want to see if I can maybe add a little bit more to the back of this narwhal and see if I can blend out this blue a little better. It gives like the slightest amount of blending. Let's mimic the outlines of the blobs on this side the same way that we did with the other side. And I will see you at the end. Alright, so this is how the full spread turns out. On the left is the Prismacolor pencils with the colorless blender, and on the right side is the watercolor pencils with water. What is so fascinating to me is that they both look like watercolor, just in different ways. Let's look at the back. The bleed through, so all of the red tones came through. The purple and the pinks came through. The blue did not go through the paper, and there was yellow. So did the yellow go through? Not really. Let's look at the other side. Did anything bleed through? No. However, it is very crinkled. This is not a watercolor sketchbook. So all in all, is this a replacement for a true watercolor technique? I will say no for multiple colors. However, if you are doing a single color pencil drawing, this can be a really, really cool way to blend your art in your sketchbook without crinkling your paper with minimal bleed through. Thank you so much for coming along with me while we did this experiment together, and I will see you next time.